As a child star, Corey Feldman earned millions, but by the time he was 15, he had just $40,000 left. The rest had been taken by his parents. They were unable to touch another payment, though. A large studio's covert $100,000 check. There was a catch. Feldman was never allowed to discuss what transpired during a major motion pictures production. Last month, the legal paperwork expired. Feldman is able to speak the truth for the first time in almost 40 years. You'll be shocked by what the studio paid to conceal. It's not just Hollywood. It reaches the highest point. Born on July 16, 1971, in Rita, California, Corey Scott Feldman came from a family that appeared to have Hollywood ties, but was really based on survival and quiet. Bob Feldman, his father, was a successful songwriter in the 1960s. He co-wrote the popular songs, "I Want Candy" and "My Boyfriend's Back," which brought him large sums of money. However, Bob's music career had all but disappeared by the time Corey was born, and those checks were becoming smaller. The true aim was no longer about cocktails and music, but his mother, Sheila, had been a waiter at the Playboy Club before doing cocktail shifts. The goal was to make their second child a steady source of income. When the idea started, Corey was just 3 years old. He starred in a McDonald's advertisement in 1974 that was dubbed a Clio Award winner. Later, however, it was revealed to be a 1976 gift card advertisement that was shot when he was just 5 years old. In any case, it depicted a youngster with large eyes opening a fast food package with delight. And something enormous began with that one commercial. Before Corey was even 10, there were over 100 advertisements. There was his face everywhere. His enthusiasm is ideal for the expanding field of child-led advertisements. Casting directors were enamored. It was a triumphant moment that belonged in a kid's scrapbook. Rather, he felt like a slave child, as Corey would later describe. The spotlight wasn't his choice. They shoved him in. The situation at home was more sinister than anyone could perceive. Corey's mother began bleaching his hair with peroxide when he was 4 years old and giving him what she claimed were caffeine pills, but were actually diet pills. She told him he was obese and unattractive when he glanced in the mirror. He was little, nervous, and perspiring. She struck him without cause, claiming it was punishment based on general principles. Once, when he was sleeping, she applied acne cream to his face. If he missed school for auditions and his grades suffered, his father, who was rarely there, would tie him to a bedpost or hit him with a belt. Since an injury could cost them a casting, Corey's parents instructed him not to ride his bike and employed a full-time housekeeper while he was earning money. Every dime he earned as a child was scrutinized like a wage. Corey made slightly over $1 million by the time he was 15. However, he only had $40,000 left when he obtained his financial documents upon his emancipation. The remainder had vanished. While he slept on a pull-out bed, his parents had used it to buy a Mercedes, a Cadillac, housekeeping services, and their way of life. Even the remaining $40,000 was demanded by his father as payment for overseeing Corey's career. Corey gave them every last dime so they could finally get away. He left without a dime in his pocket, but with legal freedom. He was broke and legally alone at the age of 15. He referred to it as his proclamation of personal emancipation. Others like Macaulay Culkin and Drew Barrymore would later be motivated to legally break free by his story. All of this was motivated by anything other than pride or love. It was desperate. Royalties for Bob Feldman had stopped coming in. Sheila had too many jobs. In order to chase auditions across town, Corey and his sister Mindy loaded up in a dilapidated station wagon. Corey demonstrated greater chemistry than Mindy, who secured a seat on a Mickey Mouse Club revival. The family turned all of their attention to him once he was cast in a regular role on the television show Bad News Bears. The parents continued to live off their kid, keeping him in simple clothes and following strict regulations, and improved the automobiles as soon as the paychecks arrived. He wanted to leave more and more the harder he worked, the more they took. At the age of 7, Corey had an appearance on More and Mindy in 1978. He portrayed an inquisitive neighborhood child who was energized by Robin Williams's wild extraterrestrial vibes. Until the takes had to end, Williams continued to improvise, making Corey giggle and deviating from the script. For the job, Corey received $500, which was a respectable salary for a youngster. Producers were informed by Man Williams that the child had genuine spark. More doors were opened by that moment. Corey was chosen to play Ricky Drummond on the television series Bad News Bears in 1979. There were 26 episodes in all. That year, he made $39,000, or $1,500 per episode. He was only 8 years old. While still in elementary school, he had to learn how to slide into bases, perform baseball feats, and play streetwise and scrappy. Teachers would silently worry about what might be happening at home when he would arrive at class with bruises and grass stains. In the same year, he made his cinematic debut in the movie Time After Time. He portrayed a child ensnared in the contemporary pursuit of Jack the Ripper. After seeing his TV work and being pleased by his ability to portray fear without going overboard, the director decided to cast him. David Warner, who remained in character between takes to maintain the authenticity of the panic, after Corey as he ran through dim alleys, earning him $20,500 for the role. Corey never once voiced any complaints. At the age of 10, he began recording for Disney in 1981. In The Fox and the Hound, he provided the voice of young Copper. It took 20 recording sessions over 6 months. He was paid $15,000. Even as adolescence began to set in, his voice had to remain steady. He collaborated with Mickey Rooney, who learned how to perform using only a microphone and provided the voice of the fox. In order to match Copper's emotions to his facial expressions, the animators even observed Corey's face while he was recording. The movie attracted over 60 years, millions of dollars. Additionally, Corey's performance was commended for its warmth and honesty. He had already appeared on programs like Alice, and 8 is enough prior to that Disney job. 8 is sufficient. He portrayed a little child in dire need of adoption. Several times he had to cry on cue. The crowd also burst into tears. When he performed Alice, he was just 6 years old, and he was able to portray grief without coming across as forced. Directors witnessed it. Lessons were unnecessary for him. In front of a camera, he simply knew how to feel. Corey was 12 by 1984. Everything changed in that year. He was chosen to play Tommy Jarvis in the last chapter, Friday the 13th. He defeated Jason Voorhees, making him the youngest figure in history. The filming took place in Topanga Canyon, Newhall, and Zaca Lake between October 1983 and January 1984. It got as low as 47 at night. By portraying himself as a younger version of the murderer, Corey, who played a horror nerd, reversed Jason's position. Ultimately, he used a machete to cut him, yelling as blood spurted out. He became famous after that yell, but it was difficult behind the scenes. He had to balance 14-hour film days with middle school. There was constant pressure. A year later, at the age of 13, he returned with a fresh start, portraying a wounded adolescent confined to a facility. It was chilly on the set. He was sprayed with ice water to simulate rain. He couldn't act, the director shouted repeatedly. Corey detested every second. In frigid water, he had to keep his eyes open. His scenes with PTSD were dramatic. He felt insecure. Furthermore, stunt actor Ted White, who played Jason, detested him. He then claimed that because he believed Corey to be a brat, he really wanted to kill him. White frightened Corey so much in one scenario that he sobbed for 30 minutes. Nevertheless, White stood up for the group and vowed to walk if they didn't treat them better. When another actress suffered from hypothermia while filming, White and Corey reconnected at horror conventions years later. They gave each other a long-lost family hug. For that first Jason film, Corey earned $50,000. He made $1 million at the age of 15, but the most of it was stolen. He was formally separated from his parents that same year. He claimed that the horror roles gave him nightmares in his 2013 book, Choreography. The blood and the mask weren't the main terror. It was the way Hollywood treated children. He described how the work never stopped: the drugs, the attacks, and the manipulation. He had 3 drug-related arrests. He spent 9 months in therapy, but the discomfort persisted. When Corey Feldman was cast as Pete Fontaine in Gremlins, he was just 12 years old. After a hurried tryout in which he defeated over 200 other children, it took place in October 1983. Each of the more than 30 gizmo puppets he had to work with weighed roughly 15 pounds. To get the sets to move, groups of puppeteers hid beneath them. For 6 weeks in a row, Corey put up 12-hour days and made $25,000. The sequence when he feeds Gizmo required 18 takes because the puppet kept spitting phony food on his shirt and glitching. However, Corey's natural response to the puppet mess was noted by filmmaker Joe Dante. Because he liked it so much, he increased Corey's screen time from 8 to 15 minutes. Corey gained notoriety after the film's $153 million global box office haul. However, The years spent working behind the scenes with the animatronics left him terrified, which prevented him from doing similar work in the future. Corey was cast as Mouth in the Goonies the next year, at the age of 13. During one of the harshest winters in recent memory, he earned $75,000 for 4 months of filming in Atoria, Oregon. His words of sarcasm were not even entirely pre-written. On set, he made up most of them. The woman kept laughing so hard that it took 12 takes to get the moment where he pretends to speak Spanish. For the housekeeper. The scenes in the cave were vicious. Some performers suffered from hypothermia while filming in actual coastal caves in Oregon, where temperatures dropped to 40 degrees. However, Corey accelerated the process. His rapid thinking would reduce scenes with a lot of dialogue that took 15 takes to only 5. He got along so well with Shaw Astin and Jeff Cohen that their on-screen camaraderie mirrored their on-set connection. Then catastrophe struck. 3 important exterior sets were buried in mudslides caused by strong storms in the Pacific Northwest in February 1985. For 8 days, filming was halted. It increased the budget by $2.3 million. The majority of the staff became irritated, but Corey was the one who kept everything together. To lighten the mood, he played practical jokes. The largest was the installation of 47 phony spiders in Sean Aton's trailer. For 2 days, Sean refused to enter the house. The pirate ship set was eventually invaded by real rats as well. However, Corey set traps and caught them himself, rather than panicking. For that, he was even paid an additional $500. The original video of the well-known wishing well scene was water damaged, so it had to be reshot. The entire cast returned for an additional 3 weeks without pay. Studio executives began offering Corey more significant jobs after observing how professional he remained throughout it all. Things became considerably more technical back on the Gremlins set. 106 puppeteers worked in shifts for the movie. In order to predict when each puppet would move, Corey learned to look for their shadows. 14 distinct puppets, all controlled from beneath the floor, were moving simultaneously in one scene, where his character locates Gizmo's child. Corey became so adept at timing his responses that Dante based their puppet programming around his timing. When the puppets didn't react appropriately later in the feeding sequence, Corey tossed popcorn at them. They retained it in the final cut, even though it was unscripted because it worked. Just to learn how to work with the puppet crew, he trained for 3 weeks before the filming. He received a unique credit as a technical advisor as a result. Even today, puppet-heavy movies employ the methods he helped create. With a $19 million budget, the Goonies made $61.5 million in the US and $125 million worldwide. On paper, Corey's $75,000 salary appeared to be a terrific deal, but after deductions for his agent, manager, and the Coogan Law Trust Fund, he only received $45,000. That left him with $15,000 after. His parents spent $30,000 in housing expenses and his mother's medical bills. In the meantime, toys and licenses brought in over $200 million for the movie. However, kid performers received no compensation for that. Corey received only $47 each time the film aired on television, but his adult co-stars received large checks from back-end transactions. He learned early on how unjust Hollywood could be from that divide, which motivated him to fight for the rights of young actors years later. After decades, an odd event occurred. Corey chose to put the prosthetic ear he wore in Stand By Me up for sale in 2021 shortly before his 50th birthday. The prop displayed the burn marks left by his father's burning of his character, Teddy Duchamp. Jordan Peele refused to disclose the amount he paid for it. On Seth Mears's show, he later made a joke about it and acknowledged that he had purchased it in a creepy way. Corey also poked fun of it, stating that fans might use it as a coaster or wear it for Halloween. He even charged $12 apiece for imitation molds. The auction, which took place between October 31 and November 3, earned funds for cancer research and anti-bullying organizations. Although it was horrible to film, the Stand By Me barf scene went on to become legendary. Exactly 5 gallons of cottage cheese and blueberry pie filling were used in the pie eating competition. The mixture for the puke shots was blasted using a vacuum hose and plunger rig. Locals from Oregon were extras, and pies with additional filling were baked for the occasion by a nearby bakery. One extra child really puked because it appeared so real. One of the most iconic scenes in movie history is the barf-orama. The period of filming in 1985 was June 17, August 23, And throughout those months, Corey experienced his own journey of maturing. While filming, he attended his first nightclub, had his first drink, and shared his first kiss. During that period, he even collaborated with River Phoenix on a music video. The lads resembled true siblings. They quarreled over little matters, such as who had the right to cross the railroad tracks first. Rob Reiner purposefully kept them together in order to strengthen their relationship. They also wreaked havoc in the hotel, pouring beer on Corey's clothes and tossing pool chairs into the water. However, it was successful. They behaved just like they did off camera as they did on screen. Nor was the incident on the train bridge a joke. Filming took a whole week. 4 petite stunt doubles with short hair and boy clothing had to sprint across the planks. For safety, they placed plywood in between the tracks. During the first tape, a brand new camera became stuck on the tracks. Reiner put pressure on the lads, telling them that they should be afraid of him if they weren't afraid of the train. In order to make the train appear closer than it actually was, they employed a lens trick. As of 2016, travelers continued to use the Loud Railway 25 engine, making the film only cost about $7.5 to $8 million. It made more than $53 million globally, and more than $52 million in the US. It made $20,795 in its first weekend of release on August 8, 1986. It later achieved significant success in New Zealand and Australia. In 1987, Corey received the Jackie Coogan Award at the 9th Youth and Film Awards. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses behind the camera. Later, Corey acknowledged that the role was too personal. His real life was dysfunctional, much like Teddy's, particularly because of his mother's domineering actions on set. Corey was just 15 years old, and already on the downward when The Lost Boys began filming in 1987. He arrived on the first day after going on a cocaine binge and kept nodding off. Joel Schumacher, the director, dismissed him. However, Corey knocked on his door the following day, apologized, and pleaded for another chance. Taking the chance, Schumacher brought him back. Everything altered as a result. Corey had already begun smoking marijuana on set, a habit that would accompany him for years. Before Edgar Frog became famous, in a strange manner, Schumacher shaped that role. He instructed Corey to return home and watch every Stallone and Chuck Norris film he could lay his hands on. Corey believed it. Edgar became a child who spoke like a veteran of the war because of him. The film's edge came from its peculiar blend of action hero and comic book nerd. Fans adored Corey's statements, such as "We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way," because he spoke them with genuine emotion. But there was a price for those luminous vampire eyes. Contact lenses weren't as soft in 1987 as they are now. They were composed of thick, oxygen-blocking glass. It was torturous for actors to wear them for hours on end. Their eyes burned and dried out. The concluding sequences, such as when Kiefer Sutherland sobs as his hand catches fire, had real tears. They were genuine sobs from genuine suffering. However, it added a spooky authenticity to the film that no special effect could replicate. Corey earned more than $1 million by the age of 15, but barely $40,000 remained when he was liberated in 1986. Through fictitious contracts and purported management fees, his parents had embezzled the remainder. He and his sister were forced into show business for financial gain by his parents, Sheila, a cocktail waitress, and Bob Feldman, a lyricist. Acting in McDonald's advertisements at the age of 3, without any control over anything, made Corey feel like a slave child. He later recalled, "Not even the Lost Boys fame could save him from such treachery." While filming The Lost Boys, he met Corey Haim, and the two hit it off right away. They used their trailers to make prank calls during downtime. That connection became a brand. Together, the two Coreys produced 9 films, and in 2007, they even starred in a reality program. They turned into a box office juggernaut. With a budget of $8.5 million, The Lost Boys made $32.3 million. But after Hayes passed away in March 2010, everything changed. 16-year-old Corey acted out actual pursuit sequences on La freeways for License to Drive. There were actual collisions even though the budget was only $8 million. Things were considerably more bizarre off camera. The two Coreys got into a cocaine contest because Sam Kinison kept turning up. They occasionally had to snort more in order to function on set since they were so high. Corey's apartment became a gathering place. Nevertheless, the film made $22.4 million and had $385 million its first weekend, opening at number 6. There was also personal turmoil in that film. Heather Graham, then 17 years old, was the object of Corey's affection. She told a teen magazine that she didn't want to kiss Haim while filming because she believed he had an illness, but they went on to date. A persistent divide resulted from the remark. In a surprising turn of events, Corey's legal case against his parents included testimony from the creators of License to Drive. After 4 unsuccessful auditions for the starring role, he was cast as the wild companion. Dream, A Little Dream, one of his most bizarre works, was released in 1989. During a botched meditation, Corey portrayed a teenager whose body becomes confused with an older man's. The film attempted to combine psychedelic, romantic, and fantasy elements. Corey had to transition between voices and personalities, while portraying 2 personas. He drew influence from drug experiences and comic books. Critics detested it. Some people referred to it as the longest and most perplexing body swap film ever created, because of how unclear the premise was. Corey provided Donatello's voice in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film in 1990. He only received $1,500. He was paid the minimum rate for a voice actor, because the movie was deemed low budget. He didn't get paid extra, despite the fact that it became the highest-grossing independent picture at the time. He continued to promote the film, even wearing turtle makeup to the premiere. In the 3rd film, he once more provided Donatello's voice, albeit for much less money. Donatello was using heroin at the time, and some fans felt that his voice sounded slow in comparison to the others. Although Corey was making roughly $500,000 annually between 1989 and 1990, the narcotics quickly depleted it. He and Haim regularly used acid, cocaine, and mushrooms. He spent 10 months in rehab after checking himself into it at the end of 1990. At that point, he opened up to his therapist about the trauma he had experienced as a child. Later, she claimed that there were obvious indications of trauma in his behavior. Despite earning millions as a child, he was deceived, bankrupt, and struggling to regain his life. No one was prepared for the reality that Corey Feldman revealed when he appeared on ABC's Nightline in August 2011. He was straightforward in his statement. Neither fame nor drugs were the biggest issues facing child actors in Hollywood. They were pedophiles. On the set of The Lost Boys, he was abused at the age of 14. Nor in a single instance, nor by a single man. He claimed that there were predators all around him. The kind of men who invited children between the ages of 10 and 16 to their grooming events. Parties where innocence vanished, and phone digits were traded like cash. The NMTO movement would not take off in the business for another 6 years. Feldman, however, had already struck the match. He even went so far as to claim that Corey Haim's death was the fault of a single man. He was still unable to identify a prominent Hollywood personality without running the risk of going bankrupt. He didn't mince words. He said that multiple hands touched him. The abuse patterns are too well organized to be coincidental. There was no scandal here. A system existed. Feldman's documentary, My Truth, The Rape of Two Coreys, was then released in 2020. He made the most heartbreaking charge of all in it. He said that on the set of Lucas, 13-year-old Corey Haim was raped by 19-year-old Charlie Sheen. Feldman stated that this was not an isolated incident. He described everything in detail. Sheen called it twisted and sick, and denied everything. Feldman, however, wasn't finished. He had already mentioned John Graham as one of his abusers on the Dr. Oz show back in 2017, even displaying his picture on the screen. Graham had co-starred with Feldman and Haim in Licensed to Drive and Dream, A Little Dream. Then the shocking news arrived. Graham was arrested for child molesting in 2001 and found guilty in 2003. According to Megan's legislation, he had neglected to register as a sexual offender. Until Feldman said it on national television, nobody seemed to notice. However, the wounds were more severe. Feldman said that his parents took advantage of him rather than merely failing to safeguard him. He began working at the age of 3. In order to make him more castable, his mother Sheila began bleaching his hair and giving him diet pills when he was 4 years old. He earned almost $1 million by the age of 15, and it was all gone by the time he freed himself. To take charge of his life, he had to sue his own parents. Feldman tweeted that the inquiry had started and named identities in a police report he submitted to the LAPD in November 2017. Feldman was 46, therefore it was over 2 days later. Additionally, child sex offenses in California had to be prosecuted prior to the victim's 40th birthday. As a man, the same system that let him down as a youngster let him down again. He requested $10,000. He received $270,000. Support skyrocketed on the internet. Our news on Reddit has 88,000 upvotes, an additional 65,000 on our films. But that's when the danger began. According to Feldman, he was struck by 2 trucks in a crosswalk. He said pressure caused his band to break up. He claimed in videos that he was being targeted for murder. The worst happened when the documentary finally appeared on March 9, 2020. My life has turned to utter chaos, he claimed, begging online for safety, believing his adversaries were watching every step, and he wasn't sure he'd live to finish the film. Feldman blamed hackers, stood in front of the audience, and said that someone didn't want the film to be seen. He had spent $300,000 in production, paid $1 million in insurance deductibles, and shelled out $400,000 in additional expenses. And now it was all burning. Thousands of people paid $20 to stream the movie, but the website crashed at precisely 8:01 p.m. It wasn't the first time someone tried to silence him. Feldman wrote a memoir in 2013 called Choreography, which was censored, raw, and disturbing. He tweeted in all caps, promising that everyone would see the movie, even if he had to mail them DVDs himself. The stream eventually worked the following day, at 3:00 p.m. Feldman said he wrote it all down exactly how it happened, but no one in the industry wanted to touch it. This censorship is what pushed him to fund the documentary himself. His publishers forced him to change the names. Lawyers told him it was too dangerous to print the full truth. And even his 2018 film, A Tale of Two Corys, had to rename the abusers. He said, "I'm taking the matter into my own hands." But that didn't stop the downward spiral. Feldman's heroin addiction finally caught up with him in September 1990, when police discovered him in a BMW with heroin in his socks, after they had just 6 months earlier caught him with 25 balloons of cocaine and heroin during a traffic stop. It was the second arrest of the year, and it wouldn't be the last time his past would bleed into his future. In 1995, Feldman developed an unlikely bond with Michael Jackson, the same Feldman who had toured with Just Say No, who was featured in an anti-drug video, spent 5 hours in Van Nuys jail, posted $5,000 bail, and another $729 for traffic warrants. He played video games at Neverland Ranch on weekends, and defended Jackson during the 2003 trials, after they had first met through Elizabeth Taylor. However, on the morning of 9/11, Feldman claimed that Jackson had received warning calls from Saudi friends before to the fall of the buildings. Even this friendship raised questions. What actually happened during those weekends at Neverland? Feldman insisted nothing inappropriate ever happened, but it followed him. In 2018, things became darker when he was investigated for sexual battery. Feldman helped get Elizabeth Taylor out of the city by running down hotel hallways and shouting for everyone to evacuate. Although the accusers later backed off, by 2028 former members of Corey's Angels had accused him of harassment and abuse, including names such as Margot Lane, Hannah Sudarth, and Jacqueline Von Riuden. The LAPD had received formal complaints, and investigations had been launched. As a result, SAG-AFTRA expelled him from the Sexual Harassment Committee. Feldman resigned willingly, but his credibility suffered as the man who had spent his career exposing predators was now being scrutinized himself. Then came the financial meltdown. According to court documents, Feldman had only $34,000 saved when he divorced his wife, Courtney, in 2024, and owed $192,000 to the IRS and $42,000 in credit card debt. Courtney said he was making $280,000 a month and not paying his band, and she demanded $5,000 a month in support. He was spending $16,599 a month, but only earning $2,136. His monthly expenses included $5,000 for health care, $2,000 for groceries and dining, $1,000 for laundry, and $1,500 for his automobile. In 2018, Feldman filed for restraining orders against stalkers, who sent death threats after someone tweeted that they wanted to see him gang raped in prison. The LAPD's Threat Management Unit took the threat seriously, and he checked into rehab once more. The court reached a settlement of $3,500, but Feldman's total income for 2023 was only 78,946 hours. He reportedly has been sober for over 25 years, although that figure includes multiple relapses. He had previously completed a lengthy stint. In 2008, stayed clean for 3 years, and then relapsed in 2019. In one notorious incident, He claimed to have been stabbed in an assassination attempt, but police found no evidence, and he refused to show his wounds, claiming the attack was related to his abuse documentary. No one was arrested, but Feldman continued to play, releasing his debut album, Former Child Actor, in 2002. In 2023, he was on the road once more with his band Truth Movement, earning $35,000 each appearance at 3 to 6 fan conventions annually, according to divorce filings. His albums include Angelic 2, The Core, and other collaborations. His shows combine pop and anti-abuse messages with 80s nostalgia. The reviews are mixed, but he continues to sing. One thing did change. California passed Assembly Bill 2189, which extended the statute of limitations for childhood sexual abuse from age 26 to 40, and established a 3-year window for old cases to be filed. That's $15,000 to $210,000 a year before taxes and expenses. Still, the numbers speak for themselves. Feldman has appeared in more than 80 movies, but by 2024 he had only $34,000 in the bank. He flew to Sacramento, met lawmakers, and celebrated when the bill passed, saying, "Now we can bring our abusers to justice." For him it was too late, but for others it opened a door. His net worth peaked at $1 million in 1986, when he was 15 years old, and is currently worth about $3 million. However, by the time he legally separated from his parents, he had only $40,000 left. The residuals from the Goonies and the Lost Boys were essentially nothing, and Feldman is still speaking out in 2025. He owed nearly $200,000 in back taxes. His monthly expenses were over $16,800, and his income in 2223 was less than $80. He is active on Cameo, and says he hasn't been contacted, but he's open to joining the Goonies sequel. He works closely with Elijah Wood on abuse advocacy, appearing alongside him on panels, speaking to schools, appearing in public service announcements, and warning parents about predators online. Wood made headlines in 2016 with remarks about Hollywood predators. Feldman continues to give interviews, post on social media, and attempt to identify the names when he feels it is legal to do so.